Hi, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf, and I am just setting up a new broadcast about the anti-hate bill in Congress that Congress passed last week. It's Naomi Wolf at Daily Clout, and I'm just going to move this a little bit over so that we have a clearer shot. And I also have a new bunch of new equipment, headphones, and a really professional microphone. And good lighting, because many of you are being so wonderful in supporting these broadcasts in which we actually read the bill, but you wanted to hear more clearly and have me hear you more clearly. So we did that. Let me know if you like the sound, if it's loud enough, if you can hear me, and I'll just go ahead. So this is a big week. Many of you made my last broadcast last week really viral. It went to thousands of viewers. And what that was I read the oaths of allegiance that Congress has taken to not put any other country ahead of the interests of the United States of America. And that was really important because of the furor over Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, who got in a lot of trouble and was the target of a lot of criticism for her comments last week. Those of you who watched last week, and people are watching, so I assume you can hear me. Can someone just text me that you can hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. I'll just plunge ahead, because if you can't hear me, you would tell me by now, I'm sure. So she had said something pretty straightforward that a lot of Americans across the political spectrum agree with. Just to recap from last week, what she had said at a town hall was that she resented those who were pushing her to demonstrate allegiance to Israel. She's talking about herself. And she said she wanted to have the conversation about, quote, the political influence in this country that says it's okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. Those were her exact words, and I'm reading them verbatim. She was attacked from many quarters as an anti-Semite, and there was a rift among the Democrats as some of them pushed to have a resolution introduced in Congress this week condemning her by name and singling out anti-Semitism specifically, and others defended her. And in fact, many American Jews have been very vocal. A big petition is going around online. I'm a signatory to disclose, in which American Jews are saying Israel and the Jewish community are not the same thing. And it's part of the First Amendment to be able to criticize any foreign country. But there was this rift in the Democratic Party. Should this resolution single out Representative Omar, single out anti-Semitism, or should it be more general? So here at Daily Clout, what we offer you is that we actually read the bills. And as those of you who follow us know, what's astonishing is how much, when you read the bills, they are different from the spin in the news. And really, these people at the top kind of are counting on us not to read the bills, because when you actually read the bills, as we do it every week, there is a new shocker. What's really newsworthy is not the spin that is in the press conferences. So Nancy Pelosi gave a press conference, very triumphantly announced when they passed H-Res 183 just on Thursday. She said it was a compromise, and she represented this as kind of a win for inclusiveness, because instead of singling out Representative Omar, singling out anti-Semitism, it is a kind of broad, the spin was, this is just a broad condemnation of hate. This condemns hate for everyone: Jews, Muslims, Christians, disabled people, LGBTQ people. And she made it sound really anodyne and not newsworthy at all, in the hope that people would take that at face value and move on. Well, I have read H-Res 183, and it's not a simple anodyne resolution. Now, do note that a resolution is not the same as a statute. A resolution expresses the sense of Congress. So it's like saying Congress really likes this or Congress really hates that. but it is the force and power of United States leadership uniting to introduce a statement about what they support or don't support. So it is impactful, even though it doesn't yet have the same effect on us as laws do. But and by the way, 23 Republicans did not sign on to this resolution for various reasons. They didn't think, some of them didn't think that it supported Israel enough because it opposed hatred of everyone. Others were silent because they have a history of supporting right-wing white supremacy groups, perhaps. But you'll see when I actually read this 7-page bill that it actually introduces some real slippery slopes into American political and public discourse, which can be built on with laws in the future. And those of you who watch Daily Clout and are members know, and we are nonpartisan, and I am Jewish, so I just want to say that this is not an anti-Israel kind of partisan thing or a pro-Israel partisan thing. There have been a number of important bills that are laws now that have passed that do increasingly build into American life penalties for criticizing Israel or for supporting the BDS movement, which is boycott, divest, and sanction. And one of them we read a couple of weeks ago, which gives real backlash if you are a contractor selling goods or services to anyone in the United States government, state or federal level, if you've ever supported the BDS movement. So there is this kind of chipping away at American public space to criticize Israel. And I'll indicate this when we read it. So in the beginning of a bill, there's a lot of whereases. I'll go as fast as I can. And it's just a way of saying, this is the reason behind why we're doing this. So whereas the First Amendment to the Constitution established the United States as a country committed to the principles of tolerance and religious freedom, and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution established equal protection of the laws as the heart of justice in the United States. True. Whereas adherence to these principles is vital to the progress of the American people and the diverse communities and religious groups of the United States. Whereas whether from the political right, center, or left, bigotry, discrimination, oppression, racism, and imputations of dual loyalty threaten American democracy and have no place in American political discourse. So stop right there. This is just page 1. I'm going to read it again because it's really important. Whereas from the political right, center, or left, bigotry, discrimination, oppression, racism, and imputations of dual loyalty threaten American democracy and have no place in American political discourse. I want to pause there for a minute because this is a big, big paragraph that does a big kind of scary thing. First of all, we have a First Amendment, and the First Amendment allows for all kinds of points of view, including those that express, and I don't like bigotry or discrimination or oppression, but the First Amendment is clear that you get to say whatever you want in the United States, including in Congress. And you can say that someone has dual loyalty. The First Amendment protects that speech. And so this says no. It contradicts the First Amendment. It says those points of view threaten American democracy. Well, the founders said expressing whatever point of view is part of American democracy. So that's a big thing to do, to say if you say someone has dual loyalty, it threatens American democracy. Or if you're a bigot, it threatens American democracy, because that lays the groundwork for undermining the First Amendment and passing laws against speech. So mark my words. And then it says, and have no place in American political discourse. So what this paragraph does is it lumps together imputations of dual loyalty with, which is kind of what Ilhan Omar and a lot of people are saying about AIPAC and about Russia and about Manafort and about Trump and about all of these foreign countries, getting influence on our elected officials in various ways, whether through deals or, you know, payments to the Clinton Foundation, as I mentioned last week, or with AIPAC funneling money to organizations that actually pay our elected officials to run their campaigns. A lot of people are criticizing that, as they should. And this says it threatens American democracy, and it has no place in American political discourse to talk about dual loyalties or loyalties to other countries. Whereas white supremacists in the United States have exploited and continue to exploit bigotry and weaponize hate for political gain, targeting traditionally persecuted peoples, including African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and other people of color, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, the LGBTQ community, immigrants, and others, with verbal attacks, incitement, and violence. So that seems like kind of a mushy but laudable paragraph saying, don't be mean to anyone. And it seems to not single out Ilhan Omar and say, here in America, we want to like everyone. But it buries this very important word, incitement, in among all of these ways of saying, don't be bigoted. And it also uses the phrase weaponize hate. And I really want you to pay attention to these two phrases. Incitement is a word that I've written about before. Incitement is the one word that brought to a standstill Israeli democracy, because there is a legal valence to the word incitement in Israel. And at first it was defined very narrowly, with laws passed that made it illegal to incite criticism or hatred of the Jewish state. But of course, with laws like that, as we've seen over and over with people who want to suppress democracies, left, right, or center, it spread and spread and spread. And so now Jewish Voice for Peace is inciting hatred or inciting violence. And what it does is it links together speech with violence. Even if all you're doing is expressing your opinion, even if you're not saying go bomb that mosque or go bomb that synagogue, which is illegal. There are laws against that even in the United States. But just expressing your opinion, once you call it incitement, that weaponizes language. And we've seen that shut down civil society in Israel. And I'm saying this from the reports of people who are engaged in civil society in Israel. And so it puts this very dangerous word, which really isn't part of American political discourse, who knows what it even means here, right into a document that Congress has passed. So now incitement exists in the United States as something that Congress is saying we can't have. And it also, pay attention to that phrase, weaponize hate, because it, you know, the First Amendment lets you hate. I mean, I don't like hate, but the First Amendment says you can hate. Other countries like Canada have laws against hate speech. Britain has laws against hate speech. The United States of America does not have laws against hate speech. And even though I don't like hate speech, that's one reason we've remained a strong democracy. And so this phrase, weaponize hate, takes speech and turns it into, again, something that is violent, something that you can legislate against. And then we go on to more blah, blah, blah language, laudable, I don't mean to dismiss it. Whereas the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. taught that persecution of any American is an assault on the rights and freedoms of all Americans, okay? Whereas on August 11th and 12th, 2017, self-identified neo-Confederates, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and Ku Klux Klansmen held white supremacist events in Charlottesville, Virginia, where they marched on a synagogue under the Nazi swastika, engaged in racist and anti-Semitic demonstrations, and committed brutal and deadly violence against peaceful Americans. Okay, that is bad. Like, this whole page is like a lot of bad things that hateful people did. Whereas a white nationalist murdered 9 African-American worshipers at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina on the evening of June 17, 2015, in the hopes of igniting a nationwide race war. Whereas on October 27, 2018, the perpetrator of the deadliest attack on Jewish people in the history of the United States killed 11 worshipers at the Tree of Life Synagogue building in Pittsburgh and reportedly stated that he wanted, quote, all Jews to die. Whereas anti-Semitism, and now we really get into language that will criminalize criticism of Israel in the United States. Whereas anti-Semitism is the centuries-old bigotry and form of racism faced by Jewish people simply because there are Jews. That is true. I'm a Jew. That's true. Whereas in 2017, the Federal Board of Investigation reported a 30% increase in hate crimes against Jews or Jewish institutions and found that attacks against Jews or Jewish institutions made up 58.1% of all religious-based hate crimes. So it doesn't specify what kind of attack, a verbal attack, graffiti. I don't mean to minimize any hate crime, but be very careful when actual hate crimes, which means violence or destruction of property, spills over into calling speech a hate crime. Whereas there is an urgent need to ensure the safety and security of Jewish communities, including synagogues, schools, cemeteries, and other institutions. Certainly, but as an American, I'm always worried when one group is singled out in language in Congress, as opposed to the language of Americans. American security needs to be protected. American safety needs to be protected. Whereas Jews are the target of anti-Semitic violence at even higher rates in many other countries than they are in the United States. Yes, but, and I'm Jewish, that's not good. But is that our Congress's job to legislate? Right? I mean, people are persecuted all over the world for being Christian, for being Kurds, for being Somali, for being women, you know, clitoridectomies, genital mutilation, gay and lesbian people all over the world are persecuted for different reasons. This is American foreign policy stating in a resolution in Congress that wiping out anti-Semitism worldwide is the job of the United States Congress. I don't like anti-Semitism. Let me stress, I am Jewish. My grandparents' family was wiped out in the Holocaust, but I am an American, just as Ilhan Omar is trying to say. She is Muslim, but she's an American. And this states that wiping out anti-Semitism, which is a point of view, it's a hateful point of view, right, is the job of the United States Congress worldwide, right? Whereas it is a foreign policy priority of the United States to monitor and combat anti-Semitism abroad. So I'm Jewish. I don't like anti-Semitism. Let's really think about that. Anti-Semitism is an attitude. It's not an act of violence. I'm not saying it's good, it's bad, but this is saying America with the First Amendment, where people are supposed to say or do whatever say whatever they want to say, as long as it's not a threat of violence in the United States of America, that it is our job to a foreign policy priority, right? Not like, let's draw down nuclear weapons that are in the hands of rogue states. Not like, let's battle climate change, which is inundating our shores according to FEMA maps. Not, let's make sure that ISIS is managed or Syria is managed, right? Not, let's bring millions of girls and women out of trafficking. A foreign policy priority is to monitor and combat the way people think in ways that we don't like around the world. To me, this is disturbing. Because you could really ask, with all the priorities America has now, is managing the thoughts of people worldwide, what our Congress should be doing. And why these specific thoughts, instead of like hatred everywhere or persecution everywhere, it is not a universalist philosophy. It's singling out one group of people. Whereas anti-Semitism includes blaming Jews as Jews when things go wrong, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or extremist view of religion, or making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotyped allegations about Jews. So anti-Semitism does include a lot of these things, but buried in this paragraph on page 3 are the seeds of anyone who criticizes Israel being lumped together as an anti-Semite and being told that they are part of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Okay? And it's very dangerous. Whereas Jewish people are subject in the media and political campaigns to numerous other dangerous anti-Semitic myths as well, including that Jews control the United States government or seek global political and financial domination, and that Jews are obsessed with money. So first of all, as a mom, why is the United States Congress recycling Jewish anti-Semitic stereotypes and putting them on paper? This, if anything, this perpetuates them. I mean, it's kind of offensive. It's kind of anti-Semitic to have Congress say these are stereotypes of Jews, but also embedded in this, why are they spelling it out in this way, not saying stereotypes of African Americans are that they, are lazy. Stereotypes of Asian people are that they work really hard. I mean, like you can name any number of hateful stereotypes, right? These particular hateful stereotypes, and they are hateful, also preclude anyone criticizing Israel or saying Israel has outsized influence in our government, or people are giving, who are supposed to be representing the United States, are giving allegiance to Israel, which is a foreign power. It spells it out in such a way that if anyone does that in the future, they are engaged in dangerous anti-Semitism. And Israel has played this game in country after country around the world, including Britain right now. They're hounding Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party with this kind of trap, which is setting it up like A equals B. Criticism of Israel equals anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism equals danger, equals violence, equals a crime, equals extremism. And then why would anyone risk stepping into that kind of morass to criticize Israel's or AIPAC's influence in the United States? And now this one at the bottom of page 3 is a doozy. Whereas accusing Jews of being, I'm skipping one. Whereas scapegoating and targeting of Jews in the United States have persisted for many years, including by the Ku Klux Klan, the America First Committee, and by modern neo-Nazis. Yes, but you could say that about many groups in the United States. Whereas accusing Jews of being more loyal to Israel or to the Jewish community than to the United States constitutes anti-Semitism because it suggests that Jewish citizens cannot be patriotic Americans and trusted neighbors when Jews have loyally served our nation every day since its founding, whether in public or community life or military service. Yes, Jews have done so, I'm proud to say. However, Ilhan Omar never said anything about Jews dual loyalty. She was talking about members of Congress dual loyalty. And so again, what this paragraph, and I've highlighted at the bottom of page 3 does, is it really carves out the way to jump on anyone who raises the issue of dual loyalty to Israel or to Russia or to Turkey, and says you're being harmful, you're being a bigot. Whereas accusations of dual loyalty generally have an insidious and pernicious history, including, and now we list all the bad things that have happened as a result of accusations of dual loyalty on page 4. 1, the discriminatory incarceration of Americans of Japanese descent during World War II on their basis of race and alleged dual loyalty. That was bad. 2, the Dreyfus affair, when Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish French artillery captain, was falsely convicted of passing secrets to Germany based on his Jewish background. The American in me reads page 4, subparagraph 2, and is wondering why French history and French anti-Semitism are being folded in to fatten this example of how bad accusations of dual loyalty are. 3, when the loyalty of President John F. Kennedy was questioned because of his Catholic faith. And 4, the post-9/11 conditions faced by Muslim Americans in the United States, including Islamophobia and false and vicious attacks on and threats to Muslim Americans for alleged association with terrorism, many of these directed by Congress, I should note. So this is setting up accusations of dual loyalty are always bad, which again is kind of a tricky snare or trap to set, because some accusations of dual loyalty have managed to root out spies, infiltrators, traitors that were really harming the United States of America. And right now there is a spotlight that citizens are starting to put on Congress at all this money flowing in from foreign governments, all this influence from foreign governments, China, Turkey, Russia, Israel, and on and on and on, Central Europe, and Congress doesn't like it. So now Congress is managing sneakily to say, anytime you raise this, you're as bad as those French anti-Semites who imprisoned Alfred Dreyfus, not part of our history at all, but let's just throw it in, or you're as bad as people who questioned the loyalty of President John F. Kennedy, which, by the way, in the First Amendment says you can do that. It may not be polite, but you can do it according to our First Amendment. Whereas anti-Muslim bigotry entails prejudicial attitudes toward Muslims and people who are perceived to be Muslim, including the irrational belief that Muslims are inherently violent, disloyal, and foreign. More stereotypes being recycled. I'm very uncomfortable with this, but they're now throwing in other paragraphs to make it seem even-handed. Whereas Muslims and people perceived to be Muslim are subjected to false and dangerous stereotypes and myths, including unfair allegations that they sympathize with individuals who engage in violence or terror or support the oppression of women, Jews, and other vulnerable communities. And at this point, I'm thinking, why is the Congress of the United States spending a week circulating every nasty stereotype about every racial and ethnic group in this country to memorialize them? This is really an ugly piece of our history. It's not going to wear well as people look back on this. Whereas in 2017, mosques were bombed in Bloomington, Minnesota, burned in Austin, Texas, Victoria, Texas, Bellevue, Washington, and Thanatasasa, Florida, and mass attacks on Muslim communities were planned against communities in Islamburg, New York in 2019, Jacksonville, Florida in 2017, and Garden City, Kansas in 2016, whereas the FBI reported that hate crimes against Muslims or Muslims institutions in the United States increased by over 99% between 2014 and 2016. And again, attacks, physical attacks, verbal attacks, we don't know. Whereas attacks motivated by bigotry against those who are Muslim or perceived to be Muslim have substantially increased since the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. Whereas the violation of an individual's civil rights based on his or her actual or perceived membership in a particular religious group clearly violates the Constitution and laws of the United States. Yeah. But again, this keeps trying to say hate is a violation of the Constitution, and hate isn't a violation of the Constitution. It's not. We shouldn't hate. But the First Amendment clearly says, I'm going to say this over and over, you have a right to hate whomever you want in the United States. And I don't think anyone should hate anyone. But this language is dangerous because it says if you have bigotry or prejudice that the Congress defines as bigotry and prejudice, you're violating someone else's rights. And that's just not true according to our law. If you discriminate against them, you're violating their rights and there's a cause of action. If you hit them or harm them or keep them from doing their job or harass them, that's a crime, right? But this is Congress legislating our thoughts. And the founders were not on board for that. They're not on board for it. So it's one thing, and it's laudable to say America stands for equality and freedom and you should love your neighbor. But this is very different. This is saying we have the right to police your thoughts. And if you think a thing we don't like, you're committing a crime. Whereas all Americans, including Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths and of no faith, have a stake in fighting anti-Semitism, as all Americans have a stake in fighting every form of bigotry and hatred against people based on religion, race, or place of birth and origin. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives, one, I mean, I have to say, why am I so uneasy about this? I'm Jewish. I want to live in an America where no one hates me or is an anti-Semite. But the founders didn't pass laws or resolutions saying Americans had a stake in having any thought process that was sanctioned by Congress. And I don't like it that there are bigots and anti-Semites in the United States, but I like it that we live in a country where people are free to have their own thoughts. And I think it's very dangerous that Congress is saying what kind of thoughts you're supposed to have, because I don't know that Congress has the right to say that everyone has a stake in thinking or behaving in a certain way. We have a stake in obeying our laws, in which discrimination is illegal in many circumstances and violence is always illegal. And and hate-driven violence is always illegal. But monitoring thoughts, this is a new one. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives rejects the perpetuation of anti-Semitic stereotypes in the United States and around the world, including the pernicious myth of dual loyalty and foreign allegiance, especially in the context of support for the United States-Israel alliance. Well, this is a big, gigantic trap that says anytime from here on in that anyone accuses any member of Congress of dual loyalty or looks closely at the money they're taking from AIPAC or any kind of foreign policy that puts Israel's needs ahead of the needs of the United States as that person perceives it, they are engaging in an anti-Semitic stereotype, which this has spelled out in kind of brilliant circular reasoning, violates people's rights. So you are now a criminal if you criticize Israel. Condemns or criticizes money going from Israel to Congress. Condemns anti-Semitic acts and statements as hateful expressions of intolerance that are contradictory to the values that define the people of the United States. Okay. They're bad, but again, First Amendment. 3, reaffirms its support for the mandate of the United States Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism as part of the broader policy proposal of fostering international religious freedom and protecting human rights all over the world. Now, we read this bill. It passed. There is such an envoy. And the job of that envoy, astonishingly, an American whose job is to monitor anti-Semitism around the world. I'm a Jew. I don't like anti-Semitism. But the way they define it is criticism of Israel. And so the United States is devoting resources and skill and law to policing the thoughts of people around the world to make sure they don't criticize Israel. 4, rejects attempts to justify hatred or violent attacks. Watch that scary equivalency. Hatred is bad, but it's a thought. Violent attacks are criminal actions. They are illegal. The former in the United States is not illegal. As an acceptable expression of disapproval or frustration over political events in the Middle East or elsewhere. So that's really, again, saying if you criticize what's going on in the Middle East, if you're frustrated with our alliance with Israel or with Saudi Arabia or any of our other allies, hatred and violent attacks are in the same paragraph, and we're going to call your criticism hatred or violent attacks. 5, acknowledges the harm suffered by Muslims and others from the harassment, discrimination, and violence that result from anti-Muslim bigotry. That's good. 6, condemns anti-Muslim discrimination and bigotry against all minorities as contrary to the values of the United States. That's fine. 7, condemns the death threats, but again, anti-Muslim discrimination, a really properly written policy should be condemns discrimination as against the values of the United States. We're not supposed to be in the business of singling out groups by race or class or ethnicity. We're not. It's against our Constitution. It's unconstitutional. All right. Condemns the death threats received by Jewish and Muslim members of Congress, including in recent weeks. Certainly that is very bad. But death threats are also illegal. They're already a crime. 8, encourages law enforcement and government officials to avoid conduct that raises the specter of unconstitutional profiling against anyone because of their race, religion, nationality, political, or particular social group, including the assignment of blame or targeting members of entire religious group for increased suspicion based on the conduct of a single individual or small group of individuals. Okay, well, again, that's a job for law enforcement and the Attorney General to make sure that there's no profiling going on. And 9, encourages all public officials to confront the reality of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, and other forms of bigotry, as well as historical struggles against them, to ensure that the United States will live up to the transcendental principles of tolerance, religious freedom, and equal protection as embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the First and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. That's the end of this resolution. It has moved ahead, overwhelmingly voted for both sides of the aisle. I posted a link from Open Secrets that showed that Israel gives more than $500,000 to the #1 recipient in Congress a year, Menendez, and gives over $40,000 a year to this number two, which is Ted Cruz. And you could go to that Open Secrets link, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, year after year after year, buckets and buckets of money. And what you have in this bill, and then I'll go to your questions, is a really clever, very sneaky, seemingly unimportant, blah, blah, blah. We hate all hate. We think everyone should be treated fairly. We invoke Martin Luther King. But buried within that, and that's what Nancy Pelosi is pitching it as, but buried within, there are these nuggets of very, very dangerous language that prepare for further criminalization of criticism of Israel, further supporting an actual special envoy that is monitoring people's criticisms of Israel and the BDS movement around the world. Is that our number one priority at a time of daily crises in our own country? And also very dangerously introduces the concept incitement, which has been used so effectively in Israel to turn any criticism of the far right, any criticism of the settlements, any criticism of violations of international law across the border. And by the way, I call on both sides always to obey international law. I'm even-handed. But incitement is an Israeli term. It has no legal valence in the United States. It's really, we're being taught it. And for the first time in my reading the bills, it's now part of, which is very dangerous, United States resolution, which has passed. So now let's look, if this is it for you and you only want to hear the reading, we're now done with the reading. Thank you for joining us at Daily Clout. Please become a member. Please become a member. You guys have responded so beautifully to signing up. It's $3.99 a month. We try to make it super affordable, free to schools and libraries, but we do have fixed monthly costs that are a lot to keep the hosting going for providing BillCam that lets you search any state or federal bill. That's on dailyclout.io. And you can find any bill. You can find this resolution. You can share it through social media. It costs money. It costs $500 a month to keep our platform up and running, and it costs another $500 to keep the data flowing. So we really need you, if you believe in this mission, which we're all in together, of reading the bills and understanding what they're really doing, and then lobbying using BillCam, right? You can create a powerful movement to tweet your representatives, to alert your networks, to create action. It's been very effective. We've had a lot of laws change when people have sent the BillCam through social media. If you like that mission, please become a member or send us a one-time donation. It matters so much. Let's see what people are saying. Lots of comments. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So lots of remarks. Will you do a Q&A? Yes, I will do a Q&A, Roscoe Rossi. So go ahead and ask me something. Elizabeth Hansen says, thank you, Naomi, for reading the legislation. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. The intolerance for having certain viewpoints gets automatic attack now. It used to be we had free speech. Now it's going away. Elizabeth, I can't agree with you more. And again, this is not a partisan thing. I've just written a book about the invention of censorship. It's called Outrages. It's going to be due out in May and June. And what you see is that censorship never stopped anyone from hating anyone. It never stopped anyone from persecuting anyone. What censorship does is it keeps people from learning. And I do remember before there was this push to criminalize speech, people really said stupid things to one another and hateful things sometimes. And then they learned. I mean, not everybody, but the only way you're going to become less stupid is by having someone call you on your stupidity. And the only way to become less hateful is for people to tell you that what you just said is hateful. And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing we had in this country. And I agree that it's going away. And paradoxically, it makes us polarize. It splits us into little identical groups, not necessarily identical by race and ethnicity, but identical by thoughts, because we're so scared to step over an inadvertent line and be demonized. And imagine, even if Ilhan Omar didn't get named in this bill, who now in Congress is going to want to raise anything having to do with Israel or dual loyalty, or Russian dual loyalty, or Turkish dual loyalty, or Ukrainian dual loyalty again, right? It's very serious. And this is our sovereignty. Like, we're either going to have elected officials who put America first, or we're not. And as I've often said, like, I'm seen as being on the left, but you can't have a democracy without sovereignty. You can't. You cannot have a democracy if your elected officials don't represent you first and foremost, at the exclusion of other allegiances. So our elected officials are compromised. They're taking money. They're taking boatloads and boatloads of money. Both sides are, from foreign powers, and scrutiny of that will get them in trouble and stop the cash cow from giving its milk. So this is, I think, a way to intimidate people who are starting to ask questions about that foreign influence. And Roscoe Rossi says, amen, Ms. Hansen. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Light Maestro gives me a nice compliment. I appreciate that. And Roscoe Rossi says, already a member. Thank you, Roscoe. Vintage Strings 6 says, I'm sure people in our government knew this was coming, so they were ready to go with it. It was just a matter of time till someone rocked the boat. Bye-bye free speech. Now, Vintage Strings, you make an interesting point, because this bill, it's only 7 pages long, but a lot of thought went into crafting it, as you saw. It's got lots of little tripwires in it that are very delicately embedded in foliage. And I think that there is an assault on free speech, and probably the wording of this bill has been in the making for some time, or on the shelf, just like the 9/11 powers that shut down democracy right after 9/11 were, suddenly there was a mini 100-page bill, the Patriot Act, that was just ready, just in time. Well, these bills are ready for the right occasion. And paradoxically, Ilhan Omar's comments, which would have been predictable given who she is and the community that she represents, she wasn't going to go along with it, presumably without some criticism of AIPAC's role, I should say, in Congress. It was an opportunity, for people who want to silence critics of our Congress, right and left, who are taking money from foreign powers. Let's see. The people will raise the issue, says Light Maestro. I hope so. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth Hansen. You said, I'll get your book and sign up on Daily Clout. Thank you, Elizabeth. I will do everything. I will work my heart out, as will our wonderful team of analysts and graphic designers and videographers, to keep bringing you these bills and explain them in ways that you can really use to protect yourself, but also for investors, or for home buyers, or for veterans. So many things in our daily life are affected by legislation. And we really have found that when we read the bills and make these like easy to follow videos and blogs to help you understand them, you can invest better. You can protect yourself when you're buying your home. You can, get your student loans paid off more easily. There's so many tripwires that elites keep everyone else from learning about. And we're here to explain the fine print so that you can empower yourself. Thanks for your answer. I appreciate it. We can only change through discussion. So true, Elizabeth Hansen. 95% Air says, thank you for your great insight. I thank you for being part of this conversation. I really do. Donna Gaffney says, the money in politics has poisoned every politician and has all but stolen our democracy. Donna, I have to agree with you. It's heartbreaking. Next week, we're going to read H.R. 1, which is the bill that has been introduced. It's a gigantic one to totally change how we vote. Nancy Pelosi is hailing it as freedom from money in politics. It has some reforms, but you're going to see that it really locks down certain kinds of new forms of intrusiveness in our voting process. And I really agree with you, Donna. The minute that people find a way to try to get the influence of money out of politics, that loophole is slammed down. Like, there was a movement for paper ballots, and then there were all these bills, state by state, prohibiting paper ballots. There's a movement for voter registration, and then there's this push to disenfranchise voters. it's just a constant battle against the people. I mean, this is what I found. And also, it's not partisan. Like, the Democrats have their way of disenfranchising people who are going to vote against them. The Republicans have their way of disenfranchising people who are going to vote against them. So it's our job to call stop on this game, which is being played with our democracy. Can you speak to false flags, fake news? Not right now. Roscoe, if you don't mind. False flags is a very tricky concept. I only speak about it historically, just to note that it's a pretty common thing historically. But fake news, I'm always trying to call out on my social media platforms. And I have since 2013, when I was really attacked for warning that that the news stream was being corrupted. But I guess what I would rather say, instead of singling out fake news, because it's so voluminous now, like, right, you've got the Russians and you've got the bots and you've got the think tanks, really, you're not going to get very far trying to, it's like a needle in a haystack, right? Trying to find the real news in a way these days. So what I like to do is what we're doing here, which is to give everyone the tools to identify real good sources and to question news sources and to press reporters. For instance, my community, which is now you, at Daily Clout, one of the things I taught my community to do was to tweet and email reporters to embed their sources in stories and to embed primary documents. And so now I'm seeing more and more reporters and news outlets doing that, which is great. So what I like to do is educate readers and educate quote unquote ordinary people to read scientific papers, to not be scared by legislation, and to, give people the tools as much as I can and the people I tap to join me can, so that you guys are not feeling like I'm being spun. Where's the truth? I'm so confused. But I know how to read that bill. That's bullshit. What that person just said about the bill, or I know how to read that scientific paper, that I'm going to lobby my representative about what they're putting in the water. That's what I like to do, is to give people as much critical thinking and information as possible. And Vintage String says, thanks and hugs to you. Well, I could just sit here all night happily accepting your lovely support and your thoughtful comments and your good observations. But I should probably let you guys go if there isn't any other pressing question or comment. Let me make sure. 95% air said, we learned the KKK and Nazis get to have a parade too, and you don't have to go. That's as American as it gets. What happened and what can we do? 95% air, you're so right. I mean, when I was growing up, my grandma, Faye Goldman, may she rest in peace, she was a fighter for the First Amendment. And she came from refugees. She came from people who were hounded out of Russia for their religion and for their views. And she loved this country because, and now we could get teary, because people could say whatever they wanted to say. And she was always telling me this story. She was born in the 1920s. She was always telling me this story of how, the Nazis marched in Skokie, Illinois, and the Jewish community let them march and stood there and protested the march. But that was such, they didn't win. The Nazis didn't win just because they marched and said their stupid, hateful words in Skokie, Illinois. What she was teaching me was that Skokie, Illinois won and America won by letting it happen and freedom of speech surviving. Like, that's the best answer to hate. That's the best answer to fascism. So now you're saying so rightly, 95% air, that's as American as it gets. And honestly, my patriotic heart could not agree with you more. This is why people all over the world want to come to the United States. It's not for our standard of living primarily. It's because all over the world, you are put in prison if you express yourself and you express your thoughts. And it is precious. That's our legacy. So what happened and what can we do? Well, to the question, what happened, I would refer you to my two books. I mean, I hate to be self-referential, but I addressed this the best I could in book form. And the two books are The End of America and its sequel, Give Me Liberty. And that will show you how bit by bit there are forces that are trying to, and doing a good job, chipping away at our democracy, our freedoms of speech and expression. First of all, everything else depends on that. Every other freedom depends on freedom of speech and freedom of thought. What can we do? Well, sweetie, let's join together. I mean, literally all of my waking hours now are devoted to this community and giving you the tools on Daily Clout that let you not only learn the bills, but lobby to change the bills and to hold Congress's feet to the fire, and your state house as well. So that, having wrestled with this question long and hard, that's the very best answer that I could come up with. But all alone, I can't do anything. I need all of you, and we need each other. So let's grow that community. And I'm also going to start creating ways for you to mobilize with other people on Daily Clout, so you can have your community that cares about the things you care about, because not all our priorities are always the same. I might be caring about landmarking, and you might be caring about reproductive rights, or freedom of speech, or small businesses, or veterans. And we need to take back democracy by moving democracy out of the places where it's been corrupted and back into the hands of the people, which is how the founders intended. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So on that note, I should probably say good night, as lovely as it is to be in communication with you. So I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to wish you a wonderful Saturday night. I'm going to ask you please to keep tuning in on Daily Clout YouTube, keep reading Daily Clout, and please, it's hard for me to ask, but I'm getting better at it. Please become members, give a membership as a gift, or make a one-time donation or a repeated donation to Daily Clout, because we need to keep the platform going and keep these researchers researching and keep producing the ability to read the bills and give you the tools to drive your democracy. This is Naomi Wolf with Daily Clout. Have a wonderful rest of your week.